Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a six from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Overthrows podcast. I'm your host, Behram Kazi, who you can find at DefMango on Twitter. And with me is Estelle Vasudevan, who you can find at Estelle_Vasudev, the number one. And we're going to be previewing Sri Lanka's upcoming two-match test series at home versus New Zealand in this particular Overthrows podcast. And I mean, Estelle, if we look at both teams, Sri Lanka, of course, lost the series in England 2-1, but they are coming off a win at the Oval, right, which was historic. And New Zealand are coming from Greater Noida, where the game was abandoned with Afghanistan due to both bad weather and terrible facilities. So it's quite the contrast, isn't it? Because Sri Lanka are warmed up and New Zealand haven't played since February.
Yeah, I was about to mention, like, not only was the test against Afghanistan abandoned, they haven't played test cricket since February, so they're coming off a pretty long break. I suspect they would have wanted to have the game against Afghanistan just as to get a measure of how things are going to be and maybe finalize some remaining spots in their playing 11, right? But it's going to be interesting coming into this series because New Zealand have, at least in the recent past, been pretty competitive in Sri Lanka. I mean, the last time they were here was in 2019 and they leveled the series 1-1 against Sri Lanka, and they won a game which was, I think, probably just 3 days worth of cricket. But Sri Lanka didn't seem like they understood the result could be gained. But New Zealand obviously went for it and were able to win in conditions that people weren't expecting them to win. So they've been good in Sri Lanka. They've beaten Sri Lanka in New Zealand in their most recent series in 2023. So I think although they will be kind of dissatisfied that they didn't get that warm-up or that test against Afghanistan, they'll also be quietly confident because they've got the kind of the team makeup to compete in these type of conditions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll get to all of that fun stuff. But of course, test cricket these days, is such that there are long breaks in between. And because New Zealand haven't played since February, it's not ideal for them. And it must be really frustrating that, their game versus Afghanistan got abandoned because that could have been pretty decent, practice for the Sri Lanka tour. And I mean, who's to say they could have even won that game, right? Because if the conditions are spinning, maybe Afghanistan would have been in with a shout. But, you mentioned New Zealand's last tour to Sri Lanka, which was in 2019. Sure, they, tied the series 1-1, but they won the second test by an innings. And this is, a venue, or Sri Lanka is a place where Kane Williamson enjoys to play, right? He really scores a lot of runs over here. So that must be something that Sri Lanka would be looking to quell.
Yeah, I mean, against England, obviously the focus would have been on Joe Root, right? And it seemed like things didn't really pan out until the last test of the 3-test series where they were able to kind of work around him. And I'm told that they had a conversation with Lasith Malinga just prior to the test, so maybe that helped. But certainly in this series, the focus will be on Kane Williamson because like you mentioned, he's done really, really well against Sri Lanka. I'm just looking at his numbers. He has 12 tests and he's averaging 78, right?
Holy
so that is...
shit.
that is like, his career average is great, 54.98. Nearly 55, but 78 against Sri Lanka is pretty incredible, right? And in Sri Lanka, the numbers are not that great. So that's the only, I think, kind of thing Sri Lanka can take out of it is that in Sri Lanka, he hasn't done that well. His average is only 26, right? So he will definitely be the one Sri Lanka will be focusing on. But if you look at that lineup again, right, they've got the players, they've got kind of personnel who have played a lot of subcontinental cricket. I mean, obviously in different formats, but they've got that kind of experience that can pull them through. They've got the likes of Glenn Phillips, who can be really dangerous in that middle to low order. They've also got the spinners to kind of go almost equal to Sri Lanka, right? In that sense. So I would be expecting the focus to be on Williamson, but Sri Lanka would also want to kind of keep their eye on the others because, again, this team can really perform well in these conditions.
It's interesting that you mentioned how Kane loves to play Sri Lanka but doesn't love to play in Sri Lanka, right? That's a really, important point to consider over here because it's not easy to play Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka. They're always a super competitive side at home. But when you look at that New Zealand batting lineup, right from the start, you've got Conway and Latham, which is quite a solid test match opening pair. You've got Kane at first drop, then the likes of Daryl Mitchell, Glenn Phillips, Rachin Ravindra, Tom Blundell is pretty good with the bat as well. A lot of these guys are pretty good players of spin, right? That's what kind of stands out and it puts them in good stead, I feel.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the conditions, right? Because you have to understand that cricket is not how it was maybe a decade ago, where you would have teams come to, teams from conditions like New Zealand come and struggle in spin-friendly conditions. But that's not necessarily the case anymore because you've got players playing around the world. Whether it's different formats, again, it doesn't matter, right? It gives them kind of that grasp of conditions in those areas. And like you said, they do handle spin well. And they're also kind of aggressive batters. So it'll be interesting to see also how Sri Lanka go about things, because if you look at Gaule's record and Prabhat Jayasuriya's record in Galle, it's been exceptional, right? And it's been extremely conducive to spin. But Sri Lanka's last win and their most recent series was dominated by the fast bowlers for Sri Lanka. So they do have depth there. And I think that is one thing that I'm very interested to see what happens with the playing 11, because to me, it might even be worth the gamble. Sri Lanka never play the 3 quicks, right? In Sri Lanka, usually they play 1 quick and maybe 3 spinners. But it might actually be worth the gamble playing 3 quicks when your second spinner, you don't really know who your second spinner is. And that is, I think, one of Sri Lanka's biggest question marks going into this series, because they didn't need to answer it in England, obviously, with the conditions not being that conducive to spin. Prabhat Jayasuriya will start, but if they want to play a second spinner, who is it that they need to include? Because Ramesh Mendis' form has not been great with the ball. He's been very inconsistent. And the only other pure spin bowler in that squad is Jeffrey van der Sey. So he hasn't played a lot of test cricket either. So do they go for, the untested or the tested and unsuccessful? Or do they stick with the fast bowling battalion, which has done really well in the recent past?
It's a very interesting conundrum that I suppose Sri Lanka find themselves in. But, of course, we know that Prabhat Jayasuriya has wreaked havoc at Galle. And I feel like there was a time where he had 50 wickets in Galle or something in not a lot of games. That's the stat I remember. But you mentioned how, of course, while he is a key weapon, he might be, left to do with too much. And they might be depending on Prabhat Jayasuriya a lot. Now, I watched Ramesh Mendis play Pakistan last year. And while he can, provide some depth with the bat, I wasn't entirely sold on his bowling. Jeffrey van der Sey has been around for eons and very recently played a critical role in that ODI series win versus India, but of course different format. Now, do you see all 3 of them playing? Do you see 2 of them playing? How do you see the lineup to be constructed? Because, one spinner cannot go into the Galle test. That much is, we can be sure about that. But there is a world in which all 3 play, and then there is a world in which 2 play. I feel like Sri Lanka would be more tempted to play Ramesh Mendis if they play just 2 to strengthen the batting. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, the thing with Ramesh Mendis is that he had a really great start to his career, right? He had a really good go of things in Test cricket early on. But it feels like, and I know this has been a topic of discussion for a long time in Sri Lankan Test cricket, he seems to have lost something to do with his action, or seems to have, there is some technical problem that he is going through. We don't know if it has been mended over the last couple of months, obviously, because Sri Lanka hasn't played test cricket, right, apart from those England series. So we don't know if things have been mended, but he is, or in the last 12 months or so, he has shown himself to be a guy who is not consistent, and that might be a major problem for Sri Lanka, particularly in conditions like this, where, as you mentioned, the Pakistan series, right? If you are not, on the money all the time, you can go for runs, and there's plenty of runs to be had in Galle. So that will be the major concern with Ramesh. His action seems to be a problem, like the repetitiveness of whether he can bowl with the same action again and again and again, right? That seems to be the problem. I would, to be honest, be tempted to play Jeffrey Van der Sey. Van der Sey hasn't had a run in Test cricket, right? He's played one Test so far, right? But he does seem like, if you look at the modern crop of kind of wrist spinners, of you've got like the Vyas Khans, and you've got Wanindu Hasaranga, and if you look at the other spinners Sri Lanka have in their kind of squads, you've got Mahesh Theekshana, you've got a lot of limited overs bowlers, right, who are very unorthodox. They don't really spin the ball much. They're quick in the air, right? Van der Sey, in my opinion, is more of an orthodox leg spinner. He gives the ball flight, and he's not overly reliant on the wrong one, as we've seen so many of those other top spinning leg spinners, right? So we haven't seen him in Test cricket to judge whether he would be a good fit. I think just when he was kind of getting into the Test setup, he had a few disciplinary issues and then kind of fell off the radar. His FC record is not bad. He's got 270 wickets at 28.19, so not terrible.
That's pretty good. If you were a leg spinner in red ball cricket and you were averaging under 30, I'd say that's a fantastic record, right? And Jeffrey Van der Sey has been doing this for quite a while as well. He looks young. He's not that young. He's an experienced campaigner. But, sorry, complete tangent, but isn't Hasaranga unretired from Tests?
Hasaranga is unretired, but he is not in contention to be selected, obviously, because he's not in the squad. I mean, Van der Sey, like I said, Van der Sey would be my pick if they're not going for the extra pace bowler, because I'm still, I had a lot of faith in Ramesh Mendis, but it seems like there's just something he needs to fix in his action and in his rhythm, which could hurt Sri Lanka if he doesn't have it. And batting depth, actually that's a really good point, because I feel like if you look at the England Test, the only reason Milan Ratnayaka played all three was because he got that 70 in the first game. I mean, they would have been sorely tempted to go with someone like Kasun Rajitha, right? Because he's obviously the more experienced and he's got the better record. But Milan Ratnayaka looked so good with the bat. I feel like they just felt they needed to have that kind of assurance at number 8. Hopefully in home conditions they don't feel the same need and they look for a more aggressive option. But yeah, that's the one kind of spot. It's very interesting to see where Sri Lanka will go with things, because it's kind of been chopping and changing a bit in the last couple of games. So it's difficult to pin down what will happen.
You know, when you get 5 tests in a row, much like Sri Lanka have over here, it's easier to try different things, because when you get that isolated 2-match test series, you're like, why or how can we change things so much? Because, you want to give the team a bit more continuity. But Sri Lanka are lucky in that sense that they've got these 5 tests, together. So I'm not entirely opposed to them trying different things. Plus, you mentioned the seamers, right? Now, of course, Sri Lanka are blessed with so many currently, like Chamira and, who else do we have? Madhushankar didn't even make the squad, right? You've got the 2 Fernandos, Asatha and Vishwa. You've got Lahiru Kumara, who's done really well in England as well. And Asatha Fernando was pretty much the MVP. Vishwa had a fantastic game at the Oval. That spell was, telling, kind of turned the game around. And then Milan Ratnayake is there as well. They've kind of gotten rid of Kasun Rajitha from the squad. Now, you obviously are feeling ambitious and want them to play three seamers. But let's say that that doesn't happen and they only stick to two, right? Which is probably the obvious outcome. Of course, I would love to see a world in which they go in with three seamers. That would be very, very new. But who would you pick? The two Fernandos, or would you make room for Lahiru Kumara because he's a bit of an enforcer?
I think you have to make room for Lahiru Kumara, don't you? Given the way he did in that last test against England, I feel like it has to be Asita and Lahiru.
But what about the fitness issues that you were mentioning to me, Estelle, that he always has these, moments where he breaks down in home tests and then that leaves too much for the other bowlers to kind of do?
Yeah, so that will be the biggest concern, in my opinion, because you've been burnt before by Lahiru Kumar, right? He's come into games, he's been taken off on the first day, and then you've got this massive burden to bear for the others. But given how he bowled, you see, the thing is, with players like Lahiru Kumar, and I'm not sure how many people will agree with me, but I think with players like him, sometimes the risk is worth it because they offer so much, right, in terms of their ability to kind of crack a game open. They offer so much. So I would be tempted. I would go with Kumara. And I know I said the opposite before the England test because he was kind of unproven in the last couple of months. But I think given the rhythm he showed in England, you have to go with him in that test and hope that he can stay fit, because if he does, in conditions in Galle, he's going to be a massive factor, because I'm sure there's not going to be nothing on offer for the quicks, right, in terms of, movement off the pitch. So he will be a key player for Sri Lanka if he does play.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. We've obviously discussed two different permutations over here. There is one permutation in which Van der Sar, Mendis and Prabhat Jayasuriya are partnered up by two seamers. And those two seamers, as per Estelle, should be Asta Fernando and Lahiru Kumara. I don't think I disagree with that either. And then there's, of course, the ambitious permutation in which you've got the two Fernandos, I'm assuming, with Lahiru Kumara. And then you've got Van der Sar and Prabhat Jayasuriya. The batting is quite light in that particular permutation. But, Test cricket is all about taking 20 wickets, and maybe, just maybe, Sri Lanka go with that. I'm seeing some comments over here. And by the way, shout out to Krishna Srinivasan, Vamsi Krishna, Sag, Revant Naya Navari, Yuvishant Dharmalingam, Ako, and Varun, of course, is also over here. So thank you guys for joining. And Krishna has brought up a point with respect to the forecast. He says that he has heard that rain is expected on all 5 days in Galle during the first test. So is this another test match then threatened by rain, Estelle?
First of all, Galle hardly ever has a draw. I can't remember. I think there was one very recently, but for years and years and years, you don't have draws in Galle, because even if it rains, conditions are so that you can get something out of the game. Secondly, this is a 6-day test.
All right. Of course, rest days are back.
There is a rest day in the game. So you have a longer period of obviously they're not going to play on one of the days. So technically it's a 5-day test, but stretched over 6 days. So there will be, enough time, I think, to get a result out of it. It is raining in Sri Lanka, but not continuously throughout the day. So I don't think weather will be too much of a factor. I don't think it'll have an impact in the result of the game, in the sense whether it'll be a draw or not. I think we'll get a result out of it.
Yeah, I sure hope so. All right, let's come to Sri Lanka's batting, and I really want to discuss the top three with you. Of course, Nishan Madushka has gotten axed from the side. You could say a touch too harsh as well, because it wasn't too long ago that he was scoring runs and they were giving him opportunities. And given Pathum Nisanka's heroics at the Oval, you'd have to say that it's almost a guarantee that he's going to be opening the batting with Karunaratne. And I personally, now don't jump the gun on me, Estelle, but I personally would not mind to see Kusal Mendis play an attacking role at first drop, much like he did at the Oval. I know that you probably don't feel the same way about this, but just think of it for a second. If he goes out there and just puts some pressure back on the opposition, he's already not scoring any runs. If he gets 30, 40, maybe 50 some days, I feel like that's not the worst strategy.
I understand what you're saying, right? And I think definitely the style in which he should play Test cricket is probably that now, right? Because he seems to have adjusted his game to limited overs to a degree where he's really struggling with, staying in and, kind of playing that stereotypical Test role at number 3. But we've heard now that, according to the selectors, that he might possibly take the gloves and bat low in the order, and we might see a change in the batting order because Dinesh Chandimal is not fully fit to keep. So I don't think he will play at 3, even if what you suggest is, I think it's a reasonable thing. The problem with Kusal Mendis is that he's been given the opportunity to do things any way he wants, right? But he hasn't seen success against good teams over the last couple of years. I mean, no disrespect to the likes of, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Ireland. But if you want to be considered as one of the better players in the side, you need to be making runs against the better sides, right? And he hasn't been able to do that over the last couple of years. I think he might slot in lower in the order, but then the question arises as to who bats at 3, right? Because that's a pivotal position, and whether you want to push the new star in Sri Lankans' eyes, Kamindu Mendis, up to 3 is a question mark.
I mean, I am totally in favor of pushing Kamindu Mendis up the order. Like 7 is not the number for him, or even 8. I feel he's batted at 8 at times. I feel like he is a 4 or 5 player. 3 might be a touch too high for him, though. I don't know. Why would you want to throw someone who is doing so well at the deep end right away when you have other options? Like, there's also another permutation in which Oshada Fernando comes in as opener and Nissanka drops to first drop, right? Like, there are lots of things you could do over here.
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing, right? Oshada Fernando had a really good run in the first unofficial test against South Africa. In South Africa, he made 180 and Sri Lanka won that game. And he was immediately flown down to Sri Lanka to join the squad, right? The problem with including him is then you have to decide between Chandimal and a wicket keeper, right? And I don't think that's going to happen because Dinesh Chandimal with the bat as a pure batter has been one of Sri Lanka's best over the last couple of years. He's made runs against everybody. And I don't see them, looking past him as a batter. It's a wicket-keeping role that they are probably looking at. So you will probably have Pathum and Dimuth right at the top. Number 3, we don't know. And then, of course, you'd have Dinesh Chandimal, you'd have Angelo Matthews, you have Dhananjay De Silva, Kamindu Mendis. And then you have to decide, do you play Kusal Mendis or do you give Sadira Samaravikrama a go with the gloves batting at number 7? Right? So Oshada Fernando, as well as he's done, I don't think this series is when he gets the opportunity to play, at least not in the first game, because of that wicket-keeping kind of conundrum they are facing right now.
Yeah, of course, because Chandimal very recently hurt himself, and when you've got other keepers, you would be tempted to kind of play them. I feel like they're going to go with Mendis. And I feel like maybe after the first test, you and I will be having a conversation about this very subject once again. Anyway, moving forward, we obviously discussed how New Zealand's batting is quite strong. There's some big names in there, and they are also good players of spin, which augurs well for New Zealand. But in terms of spin bowling options, right, New Zealand's frontline spinner is Ajaz Patel. And then you've got Bracewell and Santner for support. Now, I don't see all of those guys playing together, Estelle, because, you've got cricketers like Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra, in New Zealand's ranks who add a lot of batting depth as well. More batting depth than Bracewell and Santner, basically, because those guys can bat as well. So, do you feel like this spin bowling attack can make a massive dent? I mean, Ajaz Patel did take 10 wickets in an innings versus India, but, can he do it at Galle? I'm not sure because, look, New Zealand have Saudi and Matt Henry, right, as their seamers. Ben Sears is in the squad, but I don't think he's going to play. Apart from those two, you've got Ajaz Patel. You will need some more frontline bowlers, and a lot of these options don't scream frontline to me as far as the spinners are concerned.
Yeah, that's another question, right? It's similar to Sri Lanka's problem with the second spinner. I think New Zealand also have a question mark over that position in the side. I do think their second spinner is probably better than Sri Lanka's options at the moment because they've got Santner and Bracewell, right?
Yes.
And they've got Sri Lanka's favorite son Ranganeherath in their camp as well, kind of, helping them understand the conditions there. And left arm spin has always been successful in Galle, right? So I feel like they will go with two, and they'll go the two spinners, two fast bowlers route, because pretty much they bat until 11, right? They don't have a proper tail ender in that side, so they can opt for the extra spinner and still kind of have that depth with the bat.
Also, just to throw this out there, that they used Glenn Phillips with the ball quite a lot in Bangladesh, right? And he did find some success as well. So I think they would be encouraged to try that again, which means that there will be two more spinners in addition to, of course, Saudi and Henry. One of those spinners is Ajaz Patel. We know that. The other spinner could be Bracewell, could be Santner. Could be Rachin. Nah, it wouldn't be Rachin. I don't see Rachin making it. But yeah, I feel like if Ranganeherath is a part of, the management with the New Zealand men's team, then maybe that bowler is Mitch Santner.
Yeah. The question then is, do they want to play the two left-arm spinners? Or do they want to throw Bracewell in as kind of the off-spinning option? I would think they would go with Santner as well, mainly because Sri Lanka don't have that many. They have two left-handers, right, in their top 7. I'm remembering it right. Yeah, they've got Kamindu and they've got Dimuth, right? So they don't have that many left-handers to kind of think of the matchups and want to have an off-spinner. So between Bracewell and Santner, possibly Santner would find it easier to adapt to conditions in Galle, because like I mentioned before, they're guys who played a lot in the subcontinent, even if it's T20 cricket, right? So I would expect Santner to play. He was, I think, the sole spinner for them the last time they played, which was in February. I think they had 4 tests against South Africa and Australia, and Santner was the sole spinner in the side. So I think they'll go in the same route. They'll have the two left-arm spinners to counter Sri Lanka's right-handers, and then get a few overs of Glenn Phillips as well.
Yeah. There's also William O'Rourke in this side, and he was successful, I believe it was that South Africa series, and then Australia as well. He had some success, but of course South Africa were playing their D team, and when you have Saudi as captain, you can't not play Matt Henry. So I think those guys, like that fast bowling quartet, only two will play, and the two kind of pick themselves over there. But yeah, I'm very interested to see whether they go for Bracewell or Santner. My pick is Santner, and I would not worry about the two slow left armers thing. I mean, like you said, it's not like Sri Lanka flooded with left-handed batters. So yeah, I think New Zealand's strengths are quite big actually. Good players of spin, some very, very decorated players in there. Kane's record in Sri Lanka is a bit of a worry, but you've got other players to kind of pitch in, and they've got a bowling attack that maybe, cannot strike instantly, but is still capable of taking 20 wickets, right? So I feel like it's going to be a very evenly matched series in that regard.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, like I mentioned before, a lot of people, or a few people tend to kind of think that teams like New Zealand will struggle in conditions like this, but they've got the experience under their belts now to be competitive. And like I mentioned, in the recent past, they've been good against Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah.
And not to forget, Sri Lanka hasn't been great at home either. I mean, they lost to Pakistan in similar conditions where, they felt like the conditions were flat, but they weren't able to pick up wickets, and Pakistan was able to run through the Sri Lankan side, right? So I think New Zealand are going to be really dangerous. I'll be very interested to see how this series goes, because it does have an impact on the World Test Championship as well, right? Because both are still in contention of making that final.
And if either team wins both test matches, right? They need to win both, whoever wins this series.
Yeah.
Then they are mathematically in with a shot at making the World Test Championship final. Of course, New Zealand have to go to India and Sri Lanka have to go to South Africa, and a lot more hard work will be required. But both of these teams would be eyeing a 2-0 win, because that's what they need. A 1-all stalemate would kind of screw both teams over.
Yeah, it would. I mean, Sri Lanka have already dropped points that they shouldn't have dropped at home, right? Like, if you look at if you look at the World Test Championship, the one big key is win your games at home, and you can't allow for draws anymore, right? Because every point counts. So
Yes.
they've already dropped games to Pakistan, so they won't want to go down. They'll be kind of, I hope at least, they'll be completely focused on winning both games because, I mean, no one would expect it, but Sri Lanka in both cycles, in the last cycle and this, deep into it, they're still quite almost they are in the top two, right? They're still in contention, so they'd want to make the most of home conditions. But again, New Zealand coming to Sri Lanka have a strong team. You expect them to do well. I wouldn't be surprised honestly if they went on to win 1-0 or 2-0, but I think Sri Lanka's batting should give them the advantage in or give them the upper hand in this series, because yes, they're familiar with conditions, but also you've got guys who've been in the runs over the last couple of months, right? So that will be an advantage for them, I think.
No, it promises to be a scintillating test series, and two nations who I've always felt very warmly towards. Whenever these two teams are playing against another team, you kind of always want to support them, and when they play against each other, it's like everyone wins in a way. But anyway, let's wrap this podcast up with some predictions, Estelle. I usually just do scoreline predictions, but I thought maybe for these previews, let's do highest run scorer prediction and highest wicket taker prediction as well. I'll go first. My prediction for the series is very dry. It is 1-1. I feel like both teams will win a test match each. And then highest wicket taker, I'll go Prabhat Jayasuriya. Highest run scorer, I will go... That's a tough one, man. Let's go Tom Latham.
Okay. That's a random pick, but I think
Yep.
I'm also inclined to go with a 1-1 series result, right? Because I've been singing New Zealand's praises all through this pod. I think it'll be really close. Even if it ends 2-0, I think both games are going to be really close. Highest wicket taker, it's very difficult to look past Prabhat Jayasuriya, because even if Sri Lanka lose, he's probably going to be their highest wicket taker, right?
Yeah.
And you get the feeling that New Zealand's wickets will kind of be shared amongst all the bowlers. So I'll say Prabhat, and I'm going Kane Williamson as highest run scorer. I think he's going to turn his fortunes in Sri Lanka with the bat.
That would be really, really interesting, right? The only reason why I didn't pick Kane was because, Estelle just told me he averages 26 in Sri Lanka, so I'm not going to pick Kane. But anyway, to all of those of you who were watching this or listening in, let us know in the comment section below what you think will be the scoreline of the series and who you think will be the highest run scorer and the highest wicket taker. And thank you once again to all of the people in the comments in the live show as well on YouTube. And that pretty much wraps up this podcast. Just a quick reminder for all of you, you can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. It can prove to be your one-stop shop with respect to all the work that we do as part of this team, whether it be written content, podcasts, or videos. And we'll see you soon for another Overthrows episode. That's all for now. Goodbye. And for those of you who are with us on live, YouTube that is, stick around, because after this short ad break, Estelle and I will be previewing the India versus Bangladesh Test series.
Sometimes you just need to take the slips out and bowl defensively. And you also need to be careful with your computer's defense as well. If you need a VPN, go Nord. NordVPN.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months and gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. So put in some dot balls and turn them into maidens via NordVPN.com/Kimber.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Overthrows podcast. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at TefMango on Twitter. And with me is Estelle Vasudevan, who you can find at Estelle_Vasudev, the number 1 on Twitter. And for this particular Overthrows podcast, we are going to be previewing the upcoming 2-match test series played between India and Bangladesh in India. Now, Estelle, Bangladesh, after sweeping Pakistan 2-0 away from home, which was arguably the greatest ever moment in their cricketing history, they are traveling to India for these two test matches, which are set to be played in Chennai and Kanpur, right? The hosts, India, haven't played test cricket since March, so they could be a bit rusty. And Bangladesh are, coming from a historic triumph. But despite all of that, do you feel like there is any chance at all that we see an upset in this series? Because my mind says no.
Yeah, Shantu says if they manage to take India to the last day or the last session, anything can happen. I think for Bangladesh, it is also about not getting ahead of themselves without trying to be patronizing. Like, if they can genuinely push India, I think that'll be a win for them because, look, the result against Pakistan was great, but we have to admit that Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh are kind of about 1,000 levels lower than India at the moment, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I think again, if they can be really competitive, that'll be a win for them. Playing in India is never easy, right? That's the biggest challenge in Test cricket at the moment. Winning in India, right?
Yeah.
It's surpassed winning in England or winning in Australia. India is the toughest place to travel and win. So if they can be competitive, that will be a huge success for them. But of course, a win would be, incredible, special, right?
Yeah. I mean, even winning a solitary test out of the two would be incredible, I feel, because India have lost 4 test matches in God knows how many years, right, at home. I think that's the statistic, and it's been over a decade, if I'm not wrong. Someone in the comments can maybe give me the exact record. Varun, step on it. And the last time any team beat India in an entire series was England in 2012, and 2012 was 12 years ago, right? So you'd have to be a very, very optimistic Bangladesh fan if you feel like, they can even win a test match over here. Even if they are doing well as a team, they've actually got a fantastic team composition. The lineup really works for them, right? And yes, Krishna Srinivasan has confirmed 4 losses in 12 years since that England series in 2012. So that is immense, right? And just on some other subplots, that are kind of brewing in the air, the last time, Estelle, that Rishabh Pant played a test match was weirdly enough also versus Bangladesh. It was almost 2 years ago in Mirpur. He has made an inspirational comeback to international cricket since after a devastating injury. Went on to win the T20 World Cup with India not too long ago. And in Test cricket, he averages north of 43 with the bat in 33 tests and is the hero of the Gabba test. Of course, who could forget? Now, Pant is set to resume duties, and all of this is pretty damn big, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm very interested to see actually how India goes about with their 11 because Rishabh Pant offers so much. And I think it was always kind of hinted that when he is ready and when he's fit, he's straight in, right? They're not going to be testing him out or, having a kind of a qualification period for him because he's just that good. So I'd be interested to...
Played the Duleep Trophy recently, and I saw some of those shots that Pant plays, which are really audacious, right? And that tells me that he's ready for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And because he does play very differently to how a lot of that middle order plays, right? So he is that audacious bat who can kind of change the momentum of a game within one session. And obviously he's coming into the 11, but I'd be interested to see how they go about things elsewhere because, they've got a few batters who have kind of made runs in the limited opportunities they've got, like Sarfaraz Khan, right? What do they do with them now? How do they kind of come about with their perfect batting lineup? Because they haven't, like you mentioned, they haven't played Test cricket in a few months, in 6 months. And this is kind of the start of an extended stretch of Test cricket for them. So Rishabh Pant for sure will be in, but what does that mean for the others is a question I'd like to see how it's answered.
It's a very good question to ask, right? And of course, Pant is adding to an already strong batting lineup that India possess, right? Even if, all of those years of ranked earners brought down some averages, we saw that the surfaces versus England were very different, right? There were runs on offer, and they were more like there was more in those surfaces for different kinds of cricketers as opposed to just spinners. So I'm really curious to see if we see similar surfaces in this series because Bangladesh have some good spinners of their own. So how does India go about, their tactics and strategy is another big question we need to ask.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, another kind of interesting thing is with the batting ability their spinners offer. Again, that gives you a bit of flexibility with the bat, right? You can kind of cut short the batting and have the extra bowlers and all of that. You mentioned the struggles against spin. I think that was one of the key reasons why we saw different conditions against England, right? Because it was almost a lottery getting runs on those tracks. And it's not just about the records, right? If you look at the averages and stuff, it's also about it. You're taking home conditions are supposed to be favorable to you.
Yeah.
You take those conditions and make them a lottery, and then a good enough team or a team who is doing well on their day could possibly overturn you. So why would you want to go down that road, right? So I think that's the way the conditions they prepared for England was the right way to go. India have got the batting and the bowling to be competitive in any type of conditions, right? So giving them what would suit their strengths the best would be ideal. Then the next question is what happens to Kuldeep, right? Does Kuldeep play? Does Akshar play? Does Jadeja play? What happens there?
We'll come to all of that fun stuff, but I have this one stat from Varun in the comments. He says that since 2022, India have especially struggled versus high turn, which is over 3 degrees, when bowlers bowl in the 90s, right? And Rohit, for example, averages 200 versus, less than 3 degrees of turn and 29 versus more than 3 degrees of turn. So these are important things to look at, which makes me wonder what direction India will take with respect to the surfaces. And I don't think we'll see ranked turners, honestly, because, you would make ranked turners versus a team which doesn't have spinners. And Bangladesh are not too bad in that department. Coming back to India's batting first, right? Of course, you've got some star-studded players in there. Skipper Rohit Sharma has been one of the most outstanding openers we've seen in Test cricket in recent times, right? Yashasvi Jaiswal and Shubman Gill are absolute prodigies, S-tier talents. Virat Kohli is Virat Kohli. We don't really need to say anything about him. Sarfaraz Khan, made use of that opportunity that he finally got after so long with both hands, and he did really, really well versus England. Also a good player of spin. I think they would be tempted to play him. So that top 5 with Rishabh Pant at 6 and Jadeja at 7, is also a very terrifying batting lineup regardless of the surfaces.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? With their spinners being so good with the bat. And I think there was an article recently done about India's kind of decline in batting averages over the last couple of years. And an interesting note they had, this was on ESPN Quick Info, was that Jadeja and Akshar have actually batted better than some of the batters in the side. So they really have so much flexibility, right, with Ashwin and those two. But again, what happens to Kuldeep? He's one of the best wrist spinners in the game right now, right? And does he sit out so that a guy who can bowl quite well, again Akshar Patel, who is very good with the ball, but can offer much more with the bat, comes into the side?
Yeah. Also, some people in the comments are telling me that since Sarfaraz was playing the Leap Trophy game, he might miss out or probably will miss out on the first test, and KL will play. I mean, I understand that KL Rahul was injured when Sarfaraz got to debut, but when you have such a prolific first-class record, you are good versus spin. You've already proven yourself in a test match at home. I don't know on what basis you can drop a player from the squad then, right? Like, I'm not sure if they will bench him or not, even though you guys might be onto something over here. But if I was a part of the team management, I would definitely be keen to play Sarfaraz over KL. And that's not to say that KL is like a bad player or anything. I feel like he often cops more criticism than is required. Criticism, of course, makes sense, but he cops far too much of it. If we talk about India's seam bowling resources, right, Estelle? Actually, let's just talk about their bowling resources in general, seam and spin. Yash Dayal and Akash Deep have been included, amongst the seam bowling ranks in India. And then, of course, you've got the usual suspects in Bumrah and Siraj, right? Ashwin, Jadeja, Kuldeep and Akshar make up your spin bowling options, which are as good as it gets, really. And the only missing link over here, I suppose, is Mohammad Shami, who still isn't fully fit. Now, despite that, this is a damn good bowling roster on home turf, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, right? India's lineup is so good that they'd be good in any conditions. So that's the 11 they play, whatever combinations they go for, they'll be good. And I think one of the key reasons for that is when you have a player like Bumrah, right? You know that even if we go back to those rank turners, those dust bowls that they played in, he'd still be effective, right? And he give you an edge over other teams' bowling attacks every single game. But then if you look beyond him, they also have guys like Siraj. And I'd actually be interested to see what happens with this guy, with Yash Dayal, because he's obviously been bought into the squad because he's done well and there's something that he's, some promise that he's showing. So do they include him, give him a debut? Because like I mentioned, this is kind of the start of a longer kind of test era or test season for India, right? So do they give guys like that an opportunity, particularly because, again, no disrespect to Bangladesh, but they would be seen as a team that India would want to experiment against, right?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And also Yash Dayal brings in a left arm angle, right? So maybe that's why, they've opted for him. He gives them another option. And I feel like India might go full strength in the first test, right? Because they'd want to just kind of see where they're at. And then in the second test, I can see them perhaps experiment. Maybe, perhaps they pair up Bumrah with a debutant, right? That's also an option. I saw some of Akash Deep's bowling. He looks pretty good, right? I mean, I've heard he can bat a bit as well. So there are plenty of options over here. And of course, when it comes to the spinners, Jadeja and Ashwin alone are a handful. And then you add a third between Akshar or Kuldeep. Either of those guys provide great options. So I don't think there's any issue whatsoever over there. But Bangladesh have a few spinners up their sleeves as well. You've got two of them who can also bat, right, in Shakib and Mehdi. And Mehdi, in fact, was player of the series versus Pakistan for his brilliant all-round show not too long ago. And Shakib, incidentally, has just taken 9 wickets in a first-class game for Surrey, which is his career best in first-class cricket. And then, of course, you've got Taijul Islam, right? He has been so reliable for so long. And you take those 3 spinners into account, and that is pretty good, not too shabby at all.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, again, it's very similar to Sri Lanka, right? They've had a lot of success with their quicks in the most recent series. So do they leave one of those guys out to include Taijul? I think they should, because Taijul, like you mentioned, has been so good for so long that it's very difficult to look past him as kind of a premier left arm spinner, even if they've got Shakib and they've got Mehdi, right? So it'll be interesting to see how they go. I think Mehdi Hassan is a really, really underrated player. Coming in at number 8, he's a very good batter. But because of his utility, I feel like people don't really give him enough credit for how good a bowler he is. He has kind of He's managed to keep his place in the side because he is a good bowler and is one of the better off spinners in Test cricket right now. So, yes, he offers a lot with the bat, but with the ball as well, he's a pretty kind of special prospect for Bangladesh. Taijul, I think, is one of the better spinners as well. So I would, as unfortunate as it is, I think one of the fast bowlers are going to have to make way.
Yeah. I think all 3 of these spinners play, especially because Shakib and Mehdi can bat, and Mehdi is just coming off a prolific run versus Pakistan, right? Scored, 155 runs in those 2 test matches at an average of 77.5. and also took 10 wickets at under 19 apiece or something. So you can't like not play him. And Shakib, of course, if he is being selected for this test series, then he plays. Particularly when you've just taken 9 wickets in English conditions, you've got to play in India. So Taijul, I mean, I think he will also partner these two. When it comes to the pace bowlers for Bangladesh, Hassan Mahmood and pace demon Nahid Rana have been sensational for Bangladesh, right? They were a big part of their team's success in Pakistan. And then you have Taskeen Ahmed as well, who's got some experience. Now, this is probably the most exciting pace bowling attack in Bangladesh history, if you really think about it. And I'm just curious to see which two paces make it to the starting 11. My picks would probably be Nahid Rana and Taskeen. Even though Hassan Mahmood has been so brilliant, I would want to see, them going for the quicker bowlers so that they can extract some bite off of surfaces which might not have much to offer otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's going to be tough, but they're going to have to leave someone out. And if it were up to me, it would be Mahmood as well. Nahid Rana was really good in Pakistan. Taskeen brings with him the experience of all those years, and he's been consistently good, right? So he's not, it's not just the fact that he's played a lot of cricket, but he's been consistently good in every format for Bangladesh over the last few years. So I think it would be the right way to go about things. I'd be very, very interested to see what kind of happens with the conditions in India, because I know Bangladesh has never won in India and not really been that competitive, but you would expect them to have paid at least a little bit of attention to how well Bangladesh did with their quicks in Pakistan. So whether they do give pace-friendly conditions would be interesting to see. Just to answer one of the questions, not answer, but address one of the comments on the live, the super chats will be taken right at the end. So guys, just hang on, okay?
Yep. Also, Shariful is not available for this series for... I think Ishwar was asking, so he's not available for this one, right? But anyway, I would be really excited to see Nahid Rana, play this series, because he is just such a unknown quantity in the sense that Bangladesh have never seen anything like this before. Kid is clocking 150 plus. That is tough to face on any sort of surface, right? And this is going to be a proper test, right? Like you mentioned earlier, the toughest, task in Test cricket currently is to win in India. Like there is no doubting that whatsoever. And Nahid Rana will be up against the very best. Like I'm really excited to see his battles with Rohit and Kohli and the likes. And I really, really hope that his fitness holds up and that Bangladesh take proper care of him. And hopefully he's able to play both of these test matches. And yeah, apart from him, like even if they go with Hassan Mahmood over Taskeen, it's not the end of the world. Hassan just took his maiden fifer versus Pakistan as well. But I feel like just to get those extra clicks in, which Taskeen provides, it probably makes more sense to go with him. Now, another thing that's actually going for Bangladesh or works in their favor, Estelle, is that they have a super deep batting lineup. You've got youngsters Shadman and Zakir opening the innings. Then the skipper, Najmul Hussain Shanto, he comes in at first drop. You've got a wealth of experience after that in Mushfiqur Rahim, Mominul Haq, Shakibul Hassan, before the in-form Liton Das comes in at 7. 7, right? Let that sink in. And then you've got Mehdi at 8. So up until like number 9, you've got proper bats, basically, for Bangladesh. And I think that if they can somehow take regular wickets in this series, then this batting lineup on its day could make things really interesting. That is the only way I kind of see Bangladesh competing in this series.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, because they've kind of, Bangladesh has, I mean, they don't have the results to show for it. But they've kind of built themselves a really good core team, I would say, similar to what they had in the previous generation, where you had kind of the limited overs teams built around your Mustafizur, Mushfiq, Shakib, Tamim, those guys. They've kind of built a similar type of core in Test cricket if you look at the batting as well. Mominul is obviously a good batter. Shanto is good. Mushfiqur carries all that weight, right? Shakib isn't the batter that he was maybe a few years ago, but he's still a very, very good batter, right? I think, again, as an all-rounder, you sometimes tend to underestimate how good he can be with the bat. And Litton Das coming in under a huge amount of, or coming in with a huge amount of form on his back, right? That's going to be huge for them.
Just to reiterate, Bangladesh were 26 for 6 in the second test match versus Pakistan. Pakistan had scored 270 odd, and that is where Liton Kumar Das and Mehdi Hasan Miraz, they combined to score 165 runs together in a partnership, and Liton ultimately scored 138 with an injured back or something. So, I mean, these guys are coming off a high which is unparalleled, unprecedented really in the history of Bangladesh cricket. So if there is any time where they could potentially compete versus India, it would be this series. But then again, you have to think about this being India and them playing in India, and your mind just forces you to think that no, there can't possibly be an upset over here. Of course, India winning this 2-0. But sport is funny, Estelle, I suppose.
I mean, that's what makes it all worth it, right? To see teams like Bangladesh be competitive and, give themselves the best chance to win in conditions like they'll find in India, in against teams like India who are so good in every aspect, right? I think the only thing that could possibly work in Bangladesh's favor is some of those batters in the Indian lineup may be a bit rusty, but India still far and away, they outstrip Bangladesh in every aspect. So it's going to be really tough for Bangladesh. But, there will always be hope, because you win one, it changes everything, right? For a team like Bangladesh, it changes so much. But I have to be realistic. I would expect it to be 2-0. I mean, I don't see a way where Bangladesh are able to, in a limited overs game, yes, but not in Test cricket, not yet.
Yeah, I would love for Bangladesh to sneak away with a Test win over here, but I just don't see it happening, right? And, the country is going through so much that I just want good things to happen to Bangladesh, honestly. But India is so strong, and that too at home. Plus, Krishna Srinivasan is saying that they will be using red soil in Chennai, which means there'll be turn and bounce on offer, so there'll be a bit of, juice in it for the paces as well. Throw in Bumrah if they play Bumrah, and bam, the game is over, right? Like, there's so many fine details to all of this that I really don't think like the scoreline will be anything other than 2-0. But what about top run scorer and top wicket taker? Let's make some guesses or predictions, Estelle. I'm going to go run scorer. I'll go Yashasvi Jaiswal, and for wicket taker, I'll make this interesting. I'll go Mehdi Hasan Miraz.
Yeah, I'm looking at Yashasvi as well as the top run scorer, because he's just been in such great touch, and he's kind of that aggressive batter who will take on the game right from the start, right? And the way he played against England, I know it's 6 months ago, but the way he played against England was just incredible to watch, but particularly from a young batter like him. So I'd go with him as the top run scorer as well. Jadeja as the top wicket taker.
Yeah, no, that's a safe pick. And pace, turn, and bounce. If you've got those three things on offer in Chennai, then Jadeja could really benefit from the bounce, right? So let's see how things unfold. You guys also let us know your predictions for the scoreline, run scorer, and wicket taker in the comment section below. We've got some super chats, Estelle, so let's take those before we end this podcast. And 3 of them to be exact. Abbas Musaji with the first asks, who is the second best test team in Asia? I feel like that's the big conversation these days, isn't it? And there's no correct answer either, because Bangladesh just defeated Pakistan, or, swept them 2-0 in Pakistan's own backyard. And Pakistan did the same to Sri Lanka last year with pretty much the same team that they have right now. And Sri Lanka, even though they have just defeated England at the Oval, have some very obvious holes in their team as well. So I don't know, maybe Sri Lanka is the safer team to pick over here with respect to answer this question, but there really is no right answer.
This was a big discussion that I think Cricinfo did a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday, right? I would tend to go with Sri Lanka as well, just because yes, Sri Lanka lost to Pakistan 2-0, but they generally have been good at home, and
Yep.
they've been competitive overseas. Pakistan have been absolute crap at home.
Pakistan are like at the bottom of this pile right now. So let's not even talk about them. And Bangladesh, it's too soon, right? Sure,
Yeah,
they've created history
exactly.
in Pakistan. But
Yes.
It's far too soon. So Sri Lanka is
Bangla-
probably the safer option.
Bangladesh is like you're still thinking whether that was just a flash in the pan performance against a team that has been really bad at home, or whether it's a genuine sign of their growth, right? So I mean, people are going to say I'm biased, but I think among the three, I think at the moment it's Sri Lanka. Even if they lose 2-0 to New Zealand and then lose 2-0 to South Africa and 2-0 to Australia, then they probably move lower. But
Yeah.
at the moment, I would say it's got to be Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I would also say Sri Lanka right now. But this could change very quickly, like Estelle said, like another result here, another result there, and you never know what the correct answer to this question is. It is $1 million question, and one that we will be answering for a few years to come, I feel, because India will probably remain the best team in Asia and one of the best teams in the world. But anyway, let's go to the second super chat now, Estelle. We've got Batman9909, who says Kane played 3 innings in Sri Lanka, 6 innings in India over the last 10 years, and never in the 2020s dominating era. He surely isn't as bad considering his UAE and Bangladesh record. So, Batman, here's the thing with Kane Williamson. Obviously, we all love him. I'm yet to find a person in life or meet a person in life who hates on Kane Williamson. He's such a likable bloke and so pleasing, to the eye when you're watching him bat. He's aesthetically brilliant as well. But there is that asterisk slightly, especially when you look at the Fab Four conversation, right? Not all other conversations, because he's clearly in that Fab Four category. But when you look at Fab Four, he's got a bit of that, averages 60 plus at home and under 50 away thing going for him, or going against him, rather. And he's got to fix that at some point, and a better record in Sri Lanka and India would help. That's my take on it.
But how do you fix it if you don't play in those countries? That's the big question with Kane, right?
And also, how do you reach new levels when you barely play any test cricket, especially now with the whole casual contract thing? Whenever New Zealand will be playing a test series during the SA20, then Kane Williamson will not be playing that test series. So if he was playing 8 test matches, provided that, he wasn't injured or anything, in a year, now he'll be playing 5 or 6. You cannot get to or reach those levels if you're playing 5 to 6 test matches a year. And how do you correct those records, like to Estelle's point? So yes, this is a very layered conversation. There's a whole lot to it.
That's the point Batman is making as well, right? He hasn't played that much in Sri Lanka or India to have a superb record. I think that's one of the reasons why I went with him as like the highest run scorer in that series, because I do think he's he hasn't played test cricket since February, but like he's in one of those kind of purple patches, right, where he's making a lot of runs, even in the limited amount of opportunities he's getting. Like when you discuss the Fab Four, you always have to take it into context, right? If you look at Joe Root, how much cricket does he play versus how many runs does he get? And then you look at Williamson, he's playing 1/3 the amount of games. But I will say, it takes a lot of effort to be as consistently as good as Joe Root as well, right? So there's other side to it where you're playing 10 tests and you have to be good in each test. And Williamson probably plays 3 or 4 tests and has a shorter period where he has to be good, right? But I do think that this will be a good series for him to kind of cash in, because I think that conditions in Galle are not going to be, it's not going to be a dust bowl from what I can understand. Like Sri Lanka Galle will provide some assistance to the batters, particularly in those early couple of days. So, or that's my assumption at least. So he should have an opportunity, and not to forget, like Kane Williamson, that's a 3, right?
Yes. He's always batted at 3 though. He's a bit like Sangha in that regard, and Dravid. Like those guys were just so good at their position that you never really felt the need to move them down to 4, even though all of those guys could easily slot in at number 4, right?
I'm sure he'd be making more runs if he did bat at 4. But number 3 is one of the toughest places to bat, right? If you look around the world, it's very difficult to find. He's probably the best number 3 in the world, right? So I think Batman has a point. He hasn't really played enough cricket in these conditions in his like kind of purplest of purple patches to kind of say that he's bad. But he'll want to improve on that away record, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a solid argument to be had. We have recorded a footmarks on Joe Root recently. And we brought that up, right? We brought up how England play a fuck ton of test matches, but then also he is good across those. So you can't like slight him for that. And similarly with Kane Williamson, of course he hasn't played as many, but whatever test matches he has played, he's done really well, right? So it's a really interesting position to be in with respect to like judging the Fab Four and who is more successful and who isn't. And who's to say Kane Williamson would have been as successful if he played as many tests, but what if he missed out? What if he would have had a better record than Joe Root? It's a lot of what ifs, right?
Yeah.
And that's the major issue over here. But anyway, Yash Singh
Schrodinger's Kane Williamson.
Yeah, Schrodinger's Kane. Right, Yash Singh with the final question of the day. He says, oh my God. So I'll take this one, Estelle. He says, Wase deduced similar problems stance in December in Barber, if he remembers correctly. Not the toe thing, but similar observation on him being one-eyed. Crazy. You know, maybe it was crazy, buddy. But for me, if someone is screaming at the camera, I can't really get to the analysis part. I'm sorry.
Can you explain to me who this Wase is?
These are two guys in Pakistan who abuse
the guys with the
players
leaves?
Yeah, and scream at the top of their lungs on video. So, I mean, I don't even get to the point where they actually do any analysis. And this is my personal choice. For me, tonality is important. If you are being rude and loud and that way, then I don't really get to the point or bother going to that stretch where you actually make a point about something. But I'm sure if he said that, good on him, man. And I'm not judging anyone who watches those guys. All right. So that pretty much wraps things up, right, Estelle? And thank you to everybody who was in the comments section and interacted with us. And thank you to everyone who sent super chats as well. Don't forget to leave your predictions in the comments section, right? You have to give us your scoreline predictions for India-Bangladesh, top run scorer and top wicket taker as well. And we will catch you soon enough on another Overthrows or Uncovered or some other live podcast. Till then, that'll be all. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.
If you are following my work, we know that you are a true cricket sadist and you need your hit every day. And sometimes, sadly, there is actually no cricket to watch. So how about if someone made a very fun game that you could use for the moments when there is no on-field action? Welcome to Hit Wicket, a strategic game of cricket which isn't about slamming your finger on the screen very fast. You work out what works best based on how cricket actually works. Dot balls lead to wickets, 1s and 2s to 4s and 6s. So there is no way you can bowl a great Yorker every ball or smash 3 6s at the beginning of your innings. This is proper cricket, yet it still has some gaming powers in there as well. Hit Wicket is about playing, but also building and managing your team. You are the batter, bowler, owner, coach, and captain. It's your dream. No ads, just cricket. So download Hit Wicket today, because this is a cricket game made for you and supported by major cricket nerds. If you have a passion for sports and aspire to work in the industry, I invite you to explore my course, Fans with Laptops. This program is designed to equip you with the knowledge and skills necessary to excel in sports journalism. Fans with Laptops is a test match course tailored to the digestible T20 world. Embrace your nerdish obsession for sports and unlock your potential by